Bonjour Africa, welcome to Bite-Sized Democracy, a weekly show focusing on issues around democracy on the African continent. Our show gives you a snapshot of what's happening in Africa in fun, informative, bite-sized segments. Please do join us in conversation. Follow us on Twitter on @Afrique_democratic, #BSDemocracy. And please do like our Facebook page, African Democratic Institute. On today's show, I've got Mr. Njoya Tikum, who is the Regional Policy Advisor for the UNDP based in Addis Ababa. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much.
Okay, please, part of your role is to strengthen capacity of African governments. How do you do that as the UNDP?
I work with the Regional Service Center for Africa, UNDP's program, and we work with sub-Saharan African governments. We provide them policy guidance on different thematic areas, and particularly focus on the governance aspects of that support. And when you ask what precisely does that mean, we help government develop strategies, we help them develop mechanisms to implement those strategies, we help them come up with tools that would facilitate service delivery, we help them come up with mechanisms and tools that would curtail corruption, reduce the impact of corruption, all of these in a bid to achieve the newly adopted Sustainable Development Goals.
And I think a demographic that's ignored by most governments is the youth. And you're involved in funding of youth programs. Can you tell us more about the funding aspect and the impact of those programs that you fund?
That's a very good question, because as you very well know, about 66% of Africa's population is made up of young people, which therefore means that there's no way you can intentionally develop a program or a development program or strategy without paying specific attention to that segment of the population in every country. So we took cognizance of that fact. And so in most of the work we do, we make it a point to insist and to emphasize the importance of developing aspects of national strategy, of national development plans that focuses entirely on youth, and even further on women, young girls and young boys. So our work, when you're asking about funding, the way we operate is that we try to work with governments to implement what they have already identified. So if we have, say, $100,000 that has been given by a donor partner to support the country of Ethiopia, we ask the Ethiopian government, what is it that you want to do as a way of reducing maybe unemployment or maybe political participation and civic engagement of young people? So we work with the government to identify the gaps, and then we provide not just financial support. Most of our support is actually technical. The financial aspect is a very small pocket. UNDP is not a donor organization. It provides more of a technical support to governments so that our governments do not have to hire consultancy firms to do things that their own people could have done. So we would help train experts in those countries, who in turn would help implement those small projects. But one of the other things we do, and we take pride, is in helping civil society, young civil society groups in different countries to strive and be included in the political and developmental processes of this country. So, I mean, the regional office, for instance, we've identified Youth for SDG being the Sustainable Development Goals. We've identified programs that we can support in fostering young people to implement the Sustainable Development Goal. But what we do is we ask them, what do you want to do? What kinds of things do you think affect you the most in your own countries? And they submit ideas and proposals. We organize boot camps. And as a result of these ideas, we then sit back and ask ourselves, which of these programs are we mandated to support? Can we deliberately support?
I think it's very interesting to know that you just don't provide money, you also provide technical stuff.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting to me. Based in Addis Ababa, close proximity to the African Union. Do you work with the African Union a lot?
Yes. We do a lot of work with the African Union, and most particularly the Department of Political Affairs, because it's very much aligned to what we do, and to an extent the Peace and Security Department. We have been, for the past couple of years, organizing what is now known as the Democratic Governance Trends Dialogue, which is an annual event that brings together heads of state policy makers to discuss on specific governance issues. So we've looked at silencing the gun has been the theme as we strive to implement African Union's Agenda 2063. We have worked particularly, in my case, with the African governance architecture on promoting youth participation and inclusion. There's so many, I wouldn't call them workshops, but consultations or technical reviews and boot camps where we bring young entrepreneurs and experts in a room, or we bring policymakers and young people in a room for them to have a space to discuss on how they, young people in the civil or the private sector, can become part of decision making, or how they can contribute to the growth and prosperity and transformation of their different countries. The African governance architecture has been a formidable partner for us, but the AUC in general is a key partner to UNDP as a whole. Most of my colleagues, we have different clusters, and most of my colleagues have, bilateral excellent relationships with different departments. But it's thematic based, so it depends on what the theme is, what the issues are. We would work with them, we provide them technical support, to an extent financial support as well.
Do you think that African governments, especially the RACs, do you think they're coming together enough and sharing intelligence as to how to fight terrorism in Africa? Are we taking it as seriously as it is? Or maybe Southern Africans are not really concerned because it doesn't really affect them, but we know that in Nigeria, in Somalia, it's a big thing. How do we come together as a continent to fight terrorism?
No, I think that's a very, very good question, and in a way you've kind of preempted some of my answers, because the RECs, the RACs as you call them, the regional economic communities have a big role to play in containing or eradicating terrorism or violent extremism, that's how we like to call it in UNDP. If you look at the parts of the continent that have been heavily affected, so the Sahel region, Mali, northern Nigeria, northern Cameroon, to an extent, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Somalia, Kenya, you would realize that were it not for that coordinated approach, perhaps they would have crumbled part of Nigeria. But the Chadians, the Cameroonian forces came in, the Nigerians, the Malians, they all contributed forces as a sub-regional bloc to fight terrorism, to fight Boko Haram and the rest in that part of the world. In East Africa, Kenya is working with Uganda, it's working with Somalia to contain the whole flow of Al-Shabaab and the other M23 or whatever they call them, the rebel groups that are operating in northern Uganda as well. It is so important for the RECs to take complete ownership of the fight against terrorism. It is not a war that or a pandemic that has boundary. It's like Ebola.
Yes.
They sit in Nigeria and they tie a bomb on a little girl who is 12 years old, and this I saw, to go and blow herself up in the market across the river in Cameroon or in Mali. It has no borders. And so the approach must also be one without borders. It must be a concerted approach. I mean, you're right, to an extent. I don't think the Southern Africans have cared that much. I don't think they have cared at all. But also you have to think about it. Why should they? That's the question I ask myself. Why should they? What is wrong with ECOWAS and SEMA? Why can't these two regional blocs, between West Africa and Central Africa alone, they can handle this issue? Maybe we might say, okay, the East African bloc has not been as forceful in supporting, but IGAD has been present in supporting, the fight against Al-Shabaab. The Southern African SADC, they have their own issues. You have migration issues killing SADC. You have, drought issues killing SADC. So they have their own big cross-border issues bothering them. That I don't think it's fair to accuse them of having neglected the other parts. But African solidarity calls for them from time to time to send in expertise. South Africa, for instance, they have a good military and intelligence that can help. So instead of us going to beg France to send us intelligent apparatus, maybe we can reach out to South Africa and get some of it to install it in Niger. Where I think we need to learn a lesson as Africa is on regional integration. I think whether it's SADC, whether it's ECAS, whether it's ECOWAS, we have failed.
So what are your hopes and aspirations for the African continent?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, they say Africa is rising, right?
Yes.
And I was asking somebody, if Africa is rising, why is every young person in Africa taking a boat, risking their lives to go to a funny country, Europe, where there's nothing to do there? If Africa is rising, why is it that it's easier for me to travel to Japan or to get a visa to go to Japan than to go to Gabon, which is 10 minutes away from or to come to South Africa? Why is it that difficult for me to do these things within my own continent? Why is it difficult for me as a Cameroonian to open a business in Zambia or in Lesotho than to open one in France or in Germany? So I think my big dream for Africa is that we break down the barriers. Because if the continent is to emerge, if we are to get up there, it has to be possible for me to do business in Rwanda or in Ghana or in Nigeria or in South Africa and Zimbabwe without going through the hurdles that are currently in place. I have to be able to travel to visit you, my sister, in South Africa or Zimbabwe without waiting for 6 months for a visa. Meanwhile, at the same time, my friend from Azerbaijan can travel on their passport. So I have big hopes for the continent, but I'm also hoping that the young people of Africa must get out of their boxes. I would want to talk to all the African youth watching this program. It's time for us to thank our fathers and our forefathers for getting us our independence, and then we take the bull by the horn. Because as you're all aware, they are tired. It is our time for Africa to be transformed and to get to that next stage. We're not going to wait for anybody to come from Europe or America. This is our time. Please get up, join me, and let's transform the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tikum, for joining me for this interview. We really appreciate it, and we enjoyed speaking to you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Africa. Till next time, au revoir.